Is Advaita Saptami. It's the 7th day of the waxing moon in the month of Madhav. And so, it was just the first day of spring was yesterday, actually. I think we jumped from Vasant Panchami, the 5th day, to Advaita Saptami, the 7th day. Let me see if that happened. No, I guess Vasant Panchami was on Saturday. So spring's just started, and in our lunar calendar, where there's 15 days where the moon becomes more full, and 15 days where the moon where it disappears, we're on the 7th day, so we're just about halfway through. And Advaita appeared on this day, 500 and some odd years ago. It must be 570 years, 580 years, something like that ago that he appeared. And so if you want to look at Advaita Acharya in our tradition, there's a pair of verses that were written down in 1611, so just over 400 years ago. 2 verses were immortalized. They'd actually been written down some time before, but they got put into the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and they became the definitive version of defining and unpacking Advaita Acharya. And those 2 verses are they're like a key or a legend that makes it relatively easy to understand who Advaita is. When I say relatively easy, I mean for people who are part of our tradition. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip over the idea that you're all a part of our tradition, because you might think that you're a Hare Krishna, but I'm not so sure. Who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Is he an incarnation of Krishna? No. He's not. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. In general, our sect liaises with and associates with and hangs out with other Vaishnavas on the platform that we all worship Vishnu. And so we worship Krishna or Ram or Vishnu or Narasimha. It's all the same, and from a point of tattva or siddhanta, we're all Vaishnavas, we're all followers of Vishnu, and the followers of Vishnu are the followers of a monotheistic supreme being in ancient India. Sometimes people say, well, what if I ascribe all of the attributes you ascribe to Vishnu, I ascribe them to Shiva, or to the goddess, to Devi? You choose to ascribe all of these qualities to Krishna. But if you just change the name, Krishna, to Devi, or to Durga, or to somehow Veda Vit is showing up on my thing here. There we go. It's okay, we're good. I fixed it. Why can't I just ascribe all these qualities to Shiva or Ganesh or whoever? Murugan, Kartikeya, whoever, depending on where you're from in India. Whatever the local Ishtadev or the local Kuldev or the local god is, whatever form is worshipped in your village or your township or in your community, like what god did you grow up worshiping? Hanuman. Was that the Ishtadev of your family, or are you just guessing?
Ishtadev is Narsimhadev, actually.
You're from a Vaishnava family.
No, it's not the family, but Ishtadev is Narsimhadev.
But I'm obviously asking you about your familial background, Chief.
Yeah,
I thought you've lost your question.
Lost it,
yeah, we're not asking you the question. Hey, Sri Vallabhji, who'd you grow up worshiping?
Hanuman.
All right, see this? Honest, straightforward men. Easy answer. All right, so who'd you grow up worshiping? Ram. It's easy. Everybody's got a deity they worship in their home. And so why isn't it that Hanuman, we can just ascribe the same qualities you ascribe to Krishna, we can just rewrite the Gita, and then we can just put Hanuman's name instead of Krishna's name everywhere. Or we can say that everything you think about Krishna or Vishnu, I think about Shiva. Did you follow this? How would you respond to that? You want to go?
Krishna explains he's the Supreme Personality.
I mean, in the Devi Bhagavat, Devi explains she's the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Next.
You got to remember that. You got to remember that. How do we respond to this? You should be able to easily answer this question. So, if you guys can remember this, you'll never get stumped again. Be honest. Who thinks they know the answer? I'll call on you. I'm not going to be nice to you, but I'll call on you. Okay.
There's different levels of authority. Like for a child,
My level of authority is above your level of authority. You think you're an adult, but actually, hold on. Don't interrupt me. I got the mic. Come on. My Shastras say you're wrong. I already answered your question with him. I can give you so many verses from so many different Shastras, and my Shastras say you're the boy.
Can you quote them?
Sure.
Quote them.
In the 10 offenses against the holy name, the second offense is considered that Shiva is different than Vishnu. The name of Shiva is just as powerful as Vishnu. It's considered the same as Vishnu. And it's an offense against the holy name in the Padma Purana that you think is your scripture to consider that the name of Shiva is not as powerful as Vishnu, is not as omnipotent as Vishnu. Therefore, your own scriptures say this, you just don't understand them. As soon as you say, there's lots of different things, but my statements are the best, what does the person you're arguing with get to say?
Mine's actually the best.
Yeah, it's just easy. Whether I can quote them now or I got to go and look them up, because obviously I'm not memorizing verses propounding Devi and Shiva. So you got me there, but I still managed to recover. And now you're in trouble because I'm quoting your own books against you. It's a double-edged sword. The very thing that you're using to defeat the other party gets used against you. And so it's like saying you have a need to believe in God, but then the theist can say you have a need not to believe in God. The argument works both ways equally well. And you're waiting for someone with a reasonable degree of intelligence to notice that you're arbitrarily choosing one blade, but the other blade works against you. I mean, like I know for sure that the Devi Bhagavat tells all the stories of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but makes Devi the heroine. That I know. The exact verses, I don't know, because it's not my text. But it's not too difficult. I got a phone. I can look them up in 5 seconds, and then you're in trouble. All right, what do you got, Nick?
So for there to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that God has to be all good and all powerful. So it's a matter of which conception more closely lines up with those two qualities.
That's a good argument. That's a good argument. If you want to say that your deity is just as good as my deity, then we can look at the qualities that your deity possesses, how they're described in your sacred texts, and we can see which one most closely aligns to the qualities of omnipotence, omnibenevolence, and omniscience. That is a solid argument. That's a powerful argument. Because the problem is when you look at the Devi Bhagavat, or when you look at other scriptures, the Shiva Purana or whatever, you find that their description is not that Shiva or Devi or Ganesh or Hanuman are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, you find that they describe usually, at least if you're in the Shakta tradition or in the Shaiva tradition, they describe an Advaita position where everything is ultimately impersonal and everything merges and becomes one. So it's not that there's a group of people out there. And Kshemaraj tried to say this once. He tried to say you could go back to Shiva Loka and live eternally and serve Shiva. He was a 13th century Shaiva. But his own community criticized him for being a secret Vaishnava in a Shaiva's garb. And he was criticized by his own community for getting too close to the Vaishnavas and taking too many of their arguments. So the followers of Devi and the followers of Shiva, the philosophical texts that outline those positions are impersonal. They say that ultimately everything comes from a oneness. As such, our standard arguments against impersonalism, that how do you get something from nothing? How do you get individuality from a person who's not an individual, or from something who's not an individual? And if it was all one to start, then how did it become two? What perturbed that oneness in order to make it two? And even if you say it's illusion, then inadvertently you're saying that illusion is more powerful than the one, because illusion is able to affect the one and make the one think it's two. And therefore you're a Mayavana. You're saying that Maya is the supreme deity. So our standard arguments against impersonalism work against other schools of Hinduism that don't actually propound their deity as being the supreme personality of Godhead per se. I was lying when I said that initially. That was what you didn't catch up on. That's what you guys didn't catch. And he did. He said, actually, your deity, if you look at the way it's described, it's not described as being the supreme being. In fact, in general, these other gods are described kind of like the way that teenage superheroes might be described in an origin story of the X-Men or something like that. They sound a lot more like Roman gods and goddesses than the supreme personality of Godhead. They're filled with lust, anger, and greed, and all sorts of other negative qualities. They can be killed, and all sorts of other stuff. But separate from that, if you really look at their sacred tradition, it describes that these gods and goddesses are evolutes of an impersonal absolute. As such, standard arguments against impersonalism work against them. And when you look at the Vaishnava community in ancient India, or in medieval and modern India, which is the vast majority of Hindus, not the most popular in the West, but the vast majority of Hindus, over 70% of Hindus are Vaishnavas. The vast majority of them are Vaishnavas, and the Vaishnavas are the monotheists of India. Just like the Jews were the monotheists of the ancient Middle Eastern, Babylonian, Egyptian world. There were other communities that existed, but they were all polytheists. And instead of worshiping Baals and Ishtars, the Jews said, no, there's one supreme being. Vaishnavism is that within Hinduism. So it's not that your God is blue and my God is green and I call my God this and you call your God that, but they're described in the same way. The description of those other deities is as a demiurge, a secondary god, or alternatively, it's an evolute from an impersonal absolute. Either way, we're not dealing with Krishna. When you start talking about Vishnu, Narasimha, Varaha, Ram, etc., now you get a description of a triple O God, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, the cause of all causes, and it's personal. And therefore bhakti is possible. The bhakti of the other communities isn't really bhakti. It's bhakti in the sense that they might get in front of a deity and cry and wave a fan and do kirtan. Although actually even kirtan, if you look at ancient texts of Shaivas and Shaktas, they don't do kirtan. They have songs, they sing, they have folk music. But kirtan as a primary spiritual practice where you try to connect with a merciful, compassionate deity that will then take you to Vaikuntha and take you to an eternal realm where you can love that deity forever. A deity that's available for the price of a song. That idea of kirtan as a spiritual practice for connecting with the deity, that's only in the Vaishnava tradition. And when you find that in modern day other Hindu groups, it's because they borrowed it from us in the last 100 years, 200 years. It's a totally neo-Hindu concept. And it draws a lot of criticism from the traditionalists in those very communities, who say, why have you followed in the footsteps of the Vaishnavas? We have our own tradition. Our own Advaita tradition, our own tradition, where we may do a little bhakti, but we do bhakti to become the deity, not to serve the deity. We just discovered it's a cool way to become one with the deity, to realize Like there is no Krishnoham. Shivoham is a standard mantra. I am Shiva. It's a standard mantra. You don't find the same thing in the Vaishnava tradition. And alternatively, you don't find a philosophy, a theology of kirtan, a theology of the holy name. The holy name is a primary practice, is a way of connecting with a merciful, ever-available deity that goes on into perpetuity. I mean, we believe Hare Krishna is chanted in the spiritual world. Mother Yashoda does kirtan. Radharani does kirtan. Krishna does kirtan. Dhara, dhara, dhara. Dhara, dhara means the earth. But dhara, dhara becomes Radha, Radha. Krishna chants the name of Radharani in the spiritual world in the guise of chanting the name of the earth and offering his obeisance to the earth. So there are defining features of our tradition. We should know them. So when we interface with people from other traditions who might want to illegally and criminally and duplicitly, make this argument that we're arbitrarily choosing a deity and they could just as easily arbitrarily choose their deity, we actually have an argument against this. We have a strong argument against this. And well done. Bravo. We generally liaise with the community of Vaishnavas. And we consider ourselves to be Vaishnavas. And we get along okay with them. We go to South India, they respect us, we respect them. We have a nice relationship with the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, the Madhva Sampradaya. We claim adherence to the Madhva Sampradaya, although in many ways our philosophy and definitely our method of worship more closely resembles that of the Sri Sampradaya. Main Mahants in the Sri Sampradaya, like Chinajir and other Swamis, come to our temples, come to our programs. Most of our yagna is borrowed from the Sri Sampradaya, these other Vaishnava groups who worship Vishnu, Narayan, and we're good. We're good with them. We get along with them quite well. They think we're a little weird. Just like if you talk to an Orthodox Jew, they think the Hasidic Jews are a little weird, but they respect our strictness and we generally get along with them okay. However, we've got something that makes us different. This is what it is. We think that Krishna appeared 500 years ago. We think Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna. This isn't such a big deal for Western people who become Hare Krishnas because they never heard of Krishna. And so we tell them, hey, here's Krishna and here's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they're like, okay, well, if I buy into the whole Krishna thing, why not buy into the Chaitanya thing as well? If you want to convert a Hindu, you said you worshipped Hanuman, but you must have also worshipped Panduranga, right? Yeah. So you were just playing along with me, right, to make it easy, right? So he's from Maharashtra. He worshipped a form of Vishnu in Maharashtra called Panduranga, Pandurnath. And so, that's the form that everybody in his area of Maharashtra worships. You're from a Varkari family?
No.
Not Varkari. Anyway, right? Pandurpur is your holy place.
Yes.
Before you met us, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a Vaishnava Tirtha called Pandurpur. It's where Tukaram worshipped. The real Tukaram, not me, but the actual Tukaram. And my guru's from that place. He's from that community, the farming community in that surrounding area in Maharashtra, in rural Maharashtra. And so it's very much the heartland of India. It's like the Midwest of India. And Panduranga, this beautiful deity of Krishna with two arms, who's actually the subject of some beautiful prayers. We have that prayer, if you want to maintain society, friendship, and love, don't look at the face of Govinda as he stands on the bank of Keshi Ghat. You know that verse? All right, there you go. That verse is actually borrowed from a verse by Surdas written about Panduranga. That don't look at Panduranga as he stands on the bank of the Bhima River in this holy place of Pandurpur. And so Rupa Goswami borrowed from this verse from several hundred years prior about Panduranga. So he's from a Vaishnava Tirtha. But we're different than other Vaishnavas because although we may tell Western people, yeah, Krishna, Chaitanya, and they go, okay, no problem. They're atheists. We convince them to be theists, and then they buy into whatever we're selling, because once you cross that line, they're just like, okay, I'm yours. When you preach to a Hindu, it's a different ballgame. They've got a long-standing tradition, and then we throw at them, hey, our person 500 years ago was actually Krishna. And that freaks people out. They don't want to accept that. And sometimes we're okay with that. We say, even if you accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a great person, we'll consider you to be a Gaudiya. We get along with them okay. We install a bunch of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's feet at different Sri Vaishnava temples all over South India. You can go and see them. It was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's thing. They wouldn't have understood Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be Krishna. They would have understood him to be a great saint in our tradition. And that works. I mean, it's okay. If you appreciate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a great saint, you're pretty good. I mean, you're appreciating Radha and Krishna, the holy name, our lifestyle, Ekadasi. There's all sorts of stuff that we do that even if you accepted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a guru, you would then do all that stuff and you're a Hare Krishna. But there's another kind of Hare Krishna. And those are the people that accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. And if you look at the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the book that we're going to be reading from, or if we ever get there, the book that we'll be reading from, the first couple of chapters are dedicated to telling you that Krishna is Vishnu, because even that's a jump for people. Accepting that Krishna is Vishnu, that's a jump for people. So that's the second chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Adi Lila is Krishna is Vishnu. Read it again and you'll realize, oh, that's what's happening. It's a theological argument from the scriptures to argue that Krishna is Vishnu, to preach to South Indian Vaishnava Brahmanas who accepted Vishnu but didn't accept Krishna. Because Krishna isn't as popular in South as he is up in North. And so in our proselytizing, we came across a lot of people who accepted Vishnu, didn't accept Krishna. And then the third chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita tries to argue that exactly, Chaitanya is Krishna. So we argue that Krishna is Vishnu, right? And then we argue that Chaitanya is Krishna. And it's like A equals B and B equals C, and therefore A equals C. And we're trying to get you to the A equals C. We're trying to get you to accept that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the avatari. He's the source of all avatars. When Srila Prabhupada taught the original Bhakti Shastri, which was 10 questions in 1968, for people to be legitimate Hare Krishnas, this is early. It didn't get done, and he reestablished it in 1975. But when he first taught, he first wrote the questions for the original Bhakti Shastri exam. The first 10 questions, one of them is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu an avatar or avatari? In other words, Srila Prabhupada considered that this understanding that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the source of all avatars, not just an avatar, that he was Krishna completely, he considered that to be so important that even for his brand spanking new disciples who had just been around for a couple of years, practically speaking, or just given up whatever, that this was the line of demarcation. If you don't accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Krishna, it's okay. No one's kicking you out of the temple. We'll work with you. Generally, we just kind of skip over this. Don't even tell people this stuff. We just ignore it because it's too thorny. It's too vexing. So we just don't even get into it. People come to the temple. Who is that? Oh, that's Krishna, deity Krishna. But for us, it's a whole different ballgame. So not only is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Krishna, but Nityananda is Balaram. And Advaita is Mahavishnu. The thing is, Mahavishnu isn't that cool. This is another thing. Yeah, I said it. Feel free to throw some hate online. I'll be expecting it. If Mahavishnu was cool, then why would we have made the argument that Krishna is better and Chaitanya is best? If you look I mean, one time Prabhupada said that six Goswamis are above Brahma and Shiva. They're gopis. They're manjaris. Lakshmi doesn't even get into Vrindavan. We're after falling in love with Krishna and dancing with him in the moonlight and embracing Krishna, kissing Krishna, playing with Krishna, wrestling with Krishna, beating Krishna in a wrestling match, suckling Krishna from our breast, and feeding the Supreme Lord, the cause of all causes, our breast milk in the spiritual world with spiritual breasts and spiritual milk coming from them in a land beyond time where Krishna becomes subservient to our love and we're able to love Krishna beyond infinity. That goes so far beyond Vaikuntha. We have a story. Gopakumar went to Vaikuntha. One of our devotees from Krishna Loka went to Vaikuntha. He wasn't happy there. He didn't like the fact that there was too much awe and reverence and there was too much distance between Narayan and the devotees. So Narayan got dressed up like a cowherd boy. And much to the chagrin of the Vaikuntha Basis, all the residents of Vaikuntha with their heavenly bodies, he made them all dress up like cowherd boys. And they would do Gopa Leela in Vaikuntha and pretend they had cows and go out and herd the cows just to make this devotee Gopakumar happy. And eventually he said, I'm not feeling it. This still doesn't work for me. And Narayan then blessed him. You please go. Narayan, sometimes Krishna hides as Narayan in Goloka Vrindavan and pretends he's become Narayan because he's running from the gopis. And so he develops a four-arm form and turns into Narayan. And the gopis see Narayan and say, where's Krishna? They see the Supreme Lord, oh, Prabhuji, please tell us where Krishna is. Or alternatively, Krishna can't maintain his four-arm form in front of them because their love makes him become his real self with two arms. So, from that point of view, Mahavishnu, just simply put, isn't our thing. And the evolution of our Gaudiya tradition, initially it was like, oh, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Vishnu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Radha and Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna in the mood of Radharani. It didn't all happen at once. People had different realizations, but it took some decades for them to get written down. There had to be festivals. The Vaishnavas had to come together. They had to compare different versions. And so Advaita Acharya is Rudratva. He's according to Kavi Karnapur, he's Rudra, he's Shiva. He's Sadashiva. But even that's it's like kind of a spiritual form of Shiva, but even that's not so ecstatic. Mahavishnu isn't that ecstatic. Sadashiva isn't that ecstatic. So there's a little thing in there. Sadashiva saw Krishna in Vrindavan playing with the cowherd boys and became a cowherd boy and then danced with Krishna as a cowherd boy and played with Krishna. And that's Advaita Acharya. So who's Advaita Acharya really? Is he Mahavishnu? Is he Sadashiva? Or is he a cowherd boy? Which one's more glorious? Which one's closer to our heart? Which one's what we aspire for? You understand? So even this tradition of their great personalities merged with they loved Krishna ecstatically and it became the same tradition. Even every cowherd boy has another gopi form. It's a whole other thing. Even the cowherd boys, the Dwadas Gopals, as far as Nityananda Prabhu, they're also understood to have gopi forms as well because they don't want to miss out on Manjari Bhav. Nityananda Prabhu is connected through Manjari Bhav also, or through Sakhi Bhav, to Krishna, through a romantic relationship. How? Through Janava Mata. Who's an Angamanjari. In fact, Advaita Acharya's wife, in some ways, is more significant than Advaita. Who's Advaita Acharya's wife? Sitarani. Who is she in Krishna Leela? She's Yogamaya. in charge of beguiling everyone so they can fall in love with Krishna, forget their own divinity. Guess who else gets bewildered by Yogamaya? Krishna himself. He forgets his own divinity. He thinks he's a coward boy. The one who makes that possible is Sita Thakurani. The Shaktis of these great personalities are as important as these personalities themselves. Really, if you look at Advaita Acharya and how he's framed out in our sacred text, from the Chaitanya Bhagavats all the way through the Chaitanya Charitamrita, kind of through the whole Gaudiya lexicon, the Gaudiya corpus. He's almost exclusively glorified for being a great Vaishnava. He taught the Bhakti scriptures. If he could not explain a verse from the scriptures in the light of Bhakti, he would fast. He was a perfect Brahmana, but he gave up his Brahmanism by honoring Haridas Thakur, who was the great chanter of the holy name, and honored him with the Shraddha Patra. If you look at the Advaita Acharya and how he's conceived of as a great Vaishnava, worship Shalagram Shila, who brought Chaitanya Mahaprabhu down with his with tulsi leaves and Ganga Jal. I'll get back to that in a minute. But anyway, if you want to appreciate Advaita, here are our verses. Here's our pair of verses. We'll read through them now. Mahavishnur Jagat Karta Mayaya Yat Srijat Yadaha Tasyavatare Vayam Advaita Acharya Ishwaraha. Mahavishnu Jagat Karta. Mahavishnu is the Jagat Karta, the creator of the universe. Mayaya Ya Srijat Yadaha. He creates that, he manifests that through Maya. Through his Maya, through his potency. Through Maya. I don't know if we're going to get into this, but in Sankhya philosophy, there's a nimitta and an upada and karana of the world. There is an efficient cause and an ingredient cause. There's the energetic as well as the substantive cause. Mahavishnu is the substantive cause, and he glances over Maya and empowers her, and then effectively becomes the efficient cause as well. And you have matter and energy, and those two things together create the world in a dualistic system. But Advaita Acharya is directly responsible for Mahavishnu is directly responsible for one, and then he's indirectly responsible for the other, because he empowers Maya to act, because Maya as a powerful force has no power to act independent of him. And so within our monistic doctrine, Advaita Acharya, Mahavishnu is considered to be both the nimitta and the upada and karana of creation. Actually, Krishna says the same thing in the Gita when he says, how am I missing this? Aham sarvasya prabhavo matasavam pravartate. I'm the cause of everything. Everything comes from me. He's claiming both these causes from Sankhya. I'm not going to get into this any further. It would be a whole class to explain to you guys. If you know what I'm talking about, then you'll appreciate this point. Otherwise, we're just going to skip over it. Tasyavatara evayam Advaita Acharya Ishwara. Advaita Acharya is the Lord, and he is an avatar of Mahavishnu. This is verse number 1. So who's Advaita? Right here in our sacred text, he's an avatar of Mahavishnu. Alternatively, he's Sadashiva. Alternatively, he is Sadashiva / Mahavishnu, who became a cowherd boy. This is how he was immortalized in our tradition. The problem is, it's not that much glorification. When Nityananda Prabhu was glorified in the last chapter, it was said he's known as Shesha, but what glory is there in calling him Shesha? He's Balaram himself. So what value is there in calling him Ananta or Shesha? And Kaviraj Goswami says, but the Acharyas have said this, so we have to repeat it. He actually says that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's like it's in our scriptures, so we have to repeat it. But even himself, after glorifying Nityananda Prabhu as being Balaram directly, he's kind of like, what value is there in calling him Ananta or Shesha? The same logic would apply here to Mahavishnu. The next verse. Advaitam Hodina Advaitat. Because he's non-different from Hari, he's called Advaita. Hari is a name for Vishnu Narayan. It's the standard name for Vishnu in Bengal. Hodina Advaitat. Because of non-difference from Narayan, therefore he's known as Advaita. And Acharyam Bhakti Sangshanat. Because he spreads bhakti. Because he presents bhakti completely. He's known as Acharya. Acharya comes from achar, which means behavior. Not achar, which means pickle. Achar, pickle. Achar, two different words. Achar is from the Persian language. Achar is from Sanskrit, from char, which means to move or to act. And so your actions, your behavior is your achar. And so acharya is one who acts properly and therefore teaches by his actions. Acharya Bhakti Sangshanat. So he's called Advaita because he's non-different from Krishna, and he's called Acharya because he teaches. Bhaktavataram Isham Tvam Advaita Charyam Ashraye. I take shelter of that avatar of a devotee who is known as Advaita Acharya. He's Bhakta avatar. He's the avatar of a devotee. And I take shelter of him. To that person I take shelter. Unto him I take shelter. These are the two core verses in our tradition, in our most definitive text on the subject. And also the evolution of how these verses came to pass. The thing is, I don't like the fact that these two verses are primary, because Advaita Acharya is a cowherd boy, Advaita Acharya is the husband of Yoga Maya, Advaita Acharya as a Brijvasi. These ideas are much more attractive to me. In fact, his followers are glorified by such language. So I wondered why this is how he was remembered. I was thinking about this today. At a certain point you've read everything about our personalities in our sacred texts. It's not like our sacred texts are infinite, and so if you want to study Advaita Acharya, there's some hundreds of verses you can read, and maybe several hundred pages spread over dozens and dozens of texts, but there's only so much data, and so at some point you go back over it again and you just think about it, what you've already studied. So I thought today, why is Advaita Acharya glorified for being Mahavishnu? Why is he glorified for being Mahavishnu? Okay, and here's where I try to put it all together. All right, so there's a bunch of disparate threads, and we're going to try to tie them all together now, so let's just really pay attention for the next few minutes. Here we go. Every yuga, every millennium, but our millenniums last more than 1,000 years. Every millennium, every age, Vishnu comes and teaches something called the Yuga Dharma. The Yuga Dharma is the dharmic practice in that age that allows people to go back to the spiritual world. And so in Satya Yuga, it was meditation. Krite Dhyayata Vishnu. You meditated on Vishnu. Dhyayata. By dhyan, by meditating on Vishnu. Treta Yajato Makai. And you did yagna in the Treta Yuga. You did big elaborate sacrifices. Dvapara Paricharyayam. And you did deity worship, service to the deity in the Dwapara Yuga. Kalotat Hari Kirtanat. And in the Kali Yuga, you do Hari Kirtan. You chant the names of God. So every Kali Yuga, Vishnu appears and he teaches Hari Kirtan. And then low-class people in Kali Yuga, through the most powerful medicine that was even there during other times and was a secret during all times, that becomes the primary method, the major method. And so even our deity worship is filled with names of Krishna, our yajna is filled with names of Krishna, and we meditate on names of Krishna. We do nam smaran, we meditate on the name. Very often devotees will have, I have it on my altar at home. I have the Hare Krishna mantra on my altar. I also worship the Hare Krishna mantra along with the deity. I worship the Hare Krishna mantra because Krishna is his holy name. What is it? Krishna Nam. What is it? No.
Krishna Nam Toy Bhagavadgita.
No. Nama Rupe Krishna Avatar. What's the first two words? Kali Kali Nama Rupe Krishna Avatar. Nama Hoite Hoya Sarva Jagata Nistar. Kali Kali, in the time of Kali, Nama Rupe, in the form of his name, Krishna Avatar. Krishna descends. Krishna is his name. And so we worship Krishna's name along with the deity. We meditate on Krishna's name along with the deity. We believe that Krishna's name is Krishna. And that by meditating on Krishna's name, you'll see Krishna in the spiritual world. So, Hari Kirtan is the process. And so Gaur Narayan comes, a form of Vishnu comes every Kali Yuga and teaches people how to chant the name of Vishnu in order to achieve perfection. This time around, when it was time for the Lord to give the holy name, he thought it's not enough. Mahavishnu thought it's not enough. Mahavishnu thought, if I come, the most I can do is help people go back to Vaikuntha. I want Krishna himself to come. I'm a derivative form of Krishna. I'm Krishna without the sweetness and intimacy. I'm lacking certain seductive, romantic features that Krishna has. If you really want to distill it down, Krishna has romantic, Cupid-like features that Narayan doesn't have. Krishna's seductive. And Krishna's devotees are imbued with a certain type of intense, intimate love that you simply don't find in Vaikuntha. That's why Gopakumar had to leave. They just weren't his people. It wasn't his deity. It was like a shell of the person he wanted to worship. Even with Narayan doing his absolute best to play Krishna, it just didn't work. And so this Kali Yuga, Mahavishnu sat down and decided, I'm not capable of giving these people what they need. So instead of delivering the Yuga Dharma, I'm going to pray to Krishna to descend. And Mahavishnu, God, prayed to the origin of everything, even the origin of that. God is a job. God is the supreme being interfacing with the material world as the creator and sustainer. The supreme being has a life above simply interfacing with us, his ant farm. He has a whole nother life. So the person performing the job of God prayed to the supreme person that he is derivative of and said, you please come down. There was this idea, actually the Gita was quoted in this section. This is when we're trying to establish that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. The Gita is quoted, Yat yat acharati shreshtas, what the best of men do, tat tat evetaro janaha, that everybody else follows. Saya pramanam kurute lokas tadanavartante, and the example they set is followed by the world. And so Krishna himself has to come down to give us love of Krishna, because it goes beyond what Vishnu has the ability to give. Therefore, Mahavishnu prayed to Krishna to come down 500 years ago. And that's the origin of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ascension. If you look at our tradition, going back to Chaitanya Bhagavat, all the way through the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this idea comes up that Advaita Acharya prayed to Krishna to come down. He worshipped a Shalagram Shiva with Ganga Jal and Tulsi leaves, based on a verse in the Gautamiya Tantra. It says Krishna sells himself to a devotee who worships him with Ganga Jal and Tulsi leaves because he doesn't want anything. He just wants your love. And so the Vaishnava worship, the Vaishnava ritual is always very simple. So Mahavishnu worshipped Krishna, and that's what made Mahaprabhu come down. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it says many times, I came down because of Advaita. I heard Advaita's cries, and I came down because of him. The reason why we relate Advaita Acharya to Mahavishnu is to make this theological point. Because Advaita Acharya did this, therefore he's Mahavishnu, because it was Mahavishnu giving way to Krishna so a miracle could occur. Instead of just getting the Yuga Dharma and going back to Vaikuntha, you could end up dancing with Krishna in the spiritual world and falling in love with Krishna, something which goes beyond even what Brahma and Shiva can get, even what the Vaikuntha Vasis can get. And so Krishna himself came down personally to give that. And Advaita Acharya stepped out of the way to make room for Mahaprabhu. But without that compassion, without that mercy, then that wouldn't have been possible. And therefore, before we even glorify Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, alongside glorifying Mahaprabhu, as a kind of like a concomitant reality, like at every step, we honor and worship and appreciate Advaita Acharya as Mahavishnu and more. But that Mahavishnu point isn't small. It's linked to our entire theology that Chaitanya is Krishna, that Chaitanya goes beyond Vishnu, that Krishna goes beyond Vishnu, that ecstatic love goes beyond what's available in Vaikuntha, that we have something extra to give beyond even what the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya gives, what the Madhva Sampradaya gives. We have something special. We have a way to dance with Krishna in perpetuity, to climb on Krishna's shoulders, to suckle Krishna. We have this idea. It's an impossible idea. It's a crazy idea. We don't care. It's still our idea. Somebody told me today their faith wavered because their guru told them that you won't go back to Godhead in one lifetime. And they thought, well, then what am I doing all this for if I can't go back to Godhead? And I felt so sorry for that person when I heard this. Because like you're like just you're at the threshold. You're not even inside yet. You're right there, but you got to step inside. You got to get to a place where one lifetime, a million lifetimes, it doesn't matter. I've attached myself to a goal which is so ecstatic, which is so wonderful, which is so beautiful, which stands up to scrutiny. We can get totally philosophical with this, and we can talk about the nature of divinity and what the most beautiful form of divinity could ever exist was, and we win that battle. And then what a proper methodology for achieving that most ecstatic conceivable form might look like, and we win that battle. We got the best conception and the best methodology. It's totally consistent with what the world would look like with an all-good, all-powerful, all-merciful, all-kind, all-loving deity. We've really fleshed out what it means to be omnibenevolent, what it means to be all-good. I felt so sorry because you got to get to a place where it doesn't matter what you got to go through. Doesn't matter what you got to go through. This is like my life. I'm bound to hope. I have asha bandha. I'm just going to keep moving forward. Krishna's going to be merciful. I'll dry up the ocean with my beak. It doesn't matter. I'm never going to stop. Because this goal is so beautiful, it's taken hold in my heart, and I'm not going to renounce it for anything. Advaita is intimately linked to our Gaudiya theology. But to really appreciate what we mean when we say he's Mahavishnu, you have to understand that Vishnu stepped out of the way to make room for Krishna. We're not even done yet. We got more than this. There's also distinctions between Chaitanya and Krishna, which we'll do on Gaur Purnima. But you got to understand that Mahavishnu stepped out of the way, and that Advaita Acharya was that person who did that. and made our good fortune possible. And therefore we're indebted to him. We love him. We worship him. And he's Mahavishnu plus. Mahavishnu and more. Well, why does it focus so much in the literature? Because that miracle made Gaudiya Vaishnavism possible. It made Mahaprabhu's descent possible. It was the linchpin or the critical moment, that watershed moment, the critical mass that overcame the inertia and made the impossible possible. And that's immortalized. It's in our mind. We pray about it. Like we should have one of those paintings on our, like in any room of icons of Gaudiya Siddhanta. There should be a picture of Advaita Acharya worshipping that Shalagram Shila, crying out Krishna's name with Ganga Jal and Tulsi, crying out Krishna's name. He was also responsible for telling Mahaprabhu to go. That your service is done and you can go now. In some ways, the way to Acharya was like a tantric. Tantrics summon deities and then dismiss them when the need for the tantric deity is gone. A lot of times those deities will be androgynous, having both masculine and feminine features. Mahaprabhu has both masculine and feminine features, was summoned and also dismissed. And so there's all sorts of like corollaries to all sorts of things that were going on in India around that medieval period, and we were trying to trump all of them and show them like what was really trying to be gotten at. And so that's why we glorify Advaita as Mahavishnu. We don't want to put a ceiling on it though. He's also a cowherd boy. He's also Yogamaya. Because he's the same as his Shakti. So he's also Yogamaya. He's also a cowherd boy. He gave a blessing in the Chaitanya Chandrodayanatika that no matter what form you worship Vishnu in, because Mahaprabhu appeared, if you appreciate him, you will go to Vrindavan as well. You can worship Narasimha, Puraha. You'll also get a form in Vrindavan. Such as the Lord's mercy. Anyway, these were some things I was thinking about today. I don't think I've ever quite spoken this before. So I thought about today, and I thought I would work it out and flesh it out with you guys tonight. This idea is there in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's there in all of our poems. It's there in the Chaitanya Chandrodayanatika. It's a core part of our tradition. It's why he's a member of the Panchatattva in many ways. And so we have to remember, he's also an Acharya. He's also Bhakta Avatar. In that sense, he's very similar to Mahaprabhu. He taught us how to be a devotee. He's Bhakti Sankshana. He's preaching Bhakti by his example. And if you look at the way Acharya's life, most of it, he just looks like a pure Vaishnava. But then these other elements are there, and I want to spend some time discussing these other elements and trying to frame them out and make them so they were appreciable and they made sense as part of a larger picture of our Siddhanta. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Thank you very much, IGTV. Thank you, Facebook. Hare Krishna.